8 of the 2025 NFL season. Of course, my money line picks and best bets. We're going up a very hot 12 and 3 in the money line, 4 for 5 in best bets. And I look at this schedule this week. There's a lot of big lines. There's not a lot of small lines. And the small lines I mostly want to stay away from. I don't have a good feel on some of these lines. I have a good feel on who's going to win the game. I just don't know. It could go either way. I said last week I wasn't real confident with my picks, and yet I did go 4 for 5. So we'll see how this goes. Let's kick it off with Thursday Night Football, which I have really struggled with this year. It feels like the home team has had an advantage on Thursday nights. We've seen upsets throughout the whole season, whether it was San Francisco going into LA, the Giants over the Eagles, the Bengals over the Steelers. And now the Chargers come in and they are just banged up so much on the offensive side of the ball. Their secondary is not great. They gave up almost 40 points to the Indianapolis Colts. And now they take on a quarterback in Carson Wentz who does not do very good with pressure. But the Chargers have not been able to get after the quarterback this year. It does feel like the LA Chargers are reeling a little bit, and it does feel like the Minnesota Vikings are reeling a little bit. Now, Kevin O'Connell has struggled in this stadium, SoFi Stadium. He went 0-2 against the Rams last year. But the Chargers have not been a very good home team this year. We just saw them lose at home to the Commanders. We saw them lose at home here against the Indianapolis Colts. They obviously do not have Amari in Hampton. Vidal has been okay as a backup running back in that spot, but this offense has turned into a passing offense, which is not what Jim Harbaugh wants to be. But when you have Justin Herbert, Len McConkey, Quinshon Johnson, Keenan Allen, you are going to for the football, and that's what we're seeing with this Charger team, which, by the way, is not the strength of the Minnesota Vikings defense. Their strength, you can run on Minnesota. Now, obviously, Philadelphia last week, A.J. Brown, Devontae Smith, both had big days in the passing game, and Minnesota was able to stop Saquon Barkley. But going into that Philly game, the Minnesota Vikings' weakness on defense was the run game. So it's a very interesting style. I do think Jim Harbaugh, the physicality of the Chargers, I think they're going to try to run the football on a short week. This is one of those weird games where I think it's going to be a good game. I don't have a good feel for it. I think the Chargers are at home. I think they need to win more with how their division is looking. I know Minnesota and the NFC North have a really tough division, but the Chargers, especially after starting 3-0, have higher expectations to me than Minnesota. So I'll take the Chargers to win the game. And then we have a rematch of Thursday Night Football 2 weeks ago. Second time in 3 weeks. Usually it's really hard to beat a team 2 times in 3 weeks. A team especially as talented as Philadelphia. This is a divisional rivalry. The Giants are coming off that wild game against Denver. They were up 19-0. They lost the game 33-32. We all know the story. We know Jackson Dart, Cam Scadaboo has brought new life to the New York Giants organization. They look like a completely different team since those two were instituted into the starting lineup. Philadelphia, you know they have not gotten Saquon Barkley going. They're going to try to get Saquon Barkley going. We'll see if they can do so. They do bring in Brandon Graham out of retirement. Sounds like he may get some limited snaps this week. And that, to me, I've talked about it. You know, the Eagles' pass game and their offense have struggled a bit this season. And I understand that. And the run game obviously has not been the same. But it's mostly because the Eagles' line of scrimmage has not been the same, right? The reason they won the Super Bowl was because they were so dominant on the offensive and defensive lines. They have not done that this year. And so the Giants have a really good defensive line. And we know the Giants historically match up well with Philly, though they have in the past played the Eagles better in MetLife as opposed to Lincoln Financial Field. I can't even tell you the last time the Giants went into Lincoln Financial Field. It might have been 2013 to win a game down there at the Link. So I got the Eagles winning. The Eagles have played every game this year besides that Giants game in a one possession contest. So 7 points does feel a little bit too much. I'm not going to bet it, but I do have my birds coming out on top. Then This will be my first best bet. I'm taking New England. I'm taking them as a touchdown favorite. I think the Browns defense plays really well at home. They're historically great at home. They were to shut down a Dolphins team last week in bad weather. But Tua Tagovailoa is not Drake May. The Patriots have had really good humming here as of late, taking down the Bills, taking down the Saints. Now they take on the Browns as well as they took down the Titans. So you have Saints, Titans, Browns. We talked about the three cupcake games there after the Buffalo game. This is the last of those three. I don't think the Browns match up very well. I think Mike Vrabel and that New England Patriots defense is going to send a lot at Dylan Gabriel. I'm not sure the Browns offensive line is going to be able to produce. The Browns are a very different team away from Huntington Bank Field this season. I think New England can easily win this game by a touchdown. New England has typically gotten off to slow starts in these past few games against the Saints and the Titans. Then they turn it on come second half. I suspect that to be the case. I think it's going to be a run the football game. Ramondre Stevenson, they've only used Travion Anderson 2 times last week in the run game. We'll see if they can get them more involved. But I like New England to cover by at least a touchdown here. Then, the line says Baltimore -6.5, so I'm assuming this means Lamar Jackson is going to play. Obviously, if he does not play, that changes things. I'll have to make an amendment here. But I like the Ravens -6.5. I think it's a bad spot for the Bears, who are coming off a pretty good, decent win against the Saints. But this is John Harbaugh off a bye. This is the 1-5 Ravens. It's Lamar Jackson coming back from a hamstring injury. And this is the Ravens now seeking an opportunity. This is the start here in week 8 of the season, coming off your week 7 bye to see if you can make anything of the season. I think their defense only gave up 17 points to the Rams a couple weeks ago. The fact that they're at home, I think it could be a long day for Caleb Williams and the Bears offense. Even though they have some talent on there, I think this could be a vintage classic Ravens game where the Ravens come out, they're 1-5. Everybody thinks they're not a great team. And I think the real story here is how much Vegas does value the Ravens because the Bears are 4-2. The Ravens are 1-5. That is a 3 game difference that the Bears are better than the Ravens. And yet Vegas is saying they are almost a touchdown favorite at home. That means the Ravens are the better team as long as Lamar Jackson's in there. Give me Baltimore. And then also, listen, I think the Jets are frisky. I don't know if Joe Flacco can duplicate his performance like he did Thursday night. I don't think this is sipping the Kool-Aid too early, if you will. I'm shocked I'm doing it, but I'm taking the Bengals -6.5 here against the Jets, who Tyrod Taylor is going to be their starting quarterback. He did not look good last week against the Panthers. I don't suspect Garrett Wilson is going to be able to play. Now, the Bengals defense obviously does not have a lot of good names on there, but I don't know if the Jets are going to be able to move the ball, and I don't know if the Jets are going to be able to stop, even with Sauce Gardner in that secondary, the passing attack of a Jamar Chase, T. Higgins, Yogi Bosch, Mike Gesicki, Drew Sample, Chase Brown on the ground. All those weapons the Cincinnati Bengals have to offer. So, because of that, I think the Bengals at home, I think this is a real momentum changing moment for them. If they can win the game, Pittsburgh, if they end up losing to Green Bay on Sunday night, they could change the complete momentum of the AFC North. Cincinnati, a big win on Thursday night to keep themselves in AFC North contention. I think they bounce back here against the Jets. And I wanted to take Atlanta -7.5, but here's the thing. This game is weird because it is in a dome. And we know the Falcons are very good in a dome. We know Michael Penix plays better in a dome. We know Bijan Robinson is absolutely incredible. And you'd be inclined to want to take Atlanta -7.5 here. But I feel like every time I want to bet Atlanta by more than a touchdown, they're going to let me down. And I think that this Dolphins offense is actually tailor made to be played in a dome. Obviously, Miami controlled environment. I think they got completely embarrassed last week by the Browns. And I do think they're somewhat soft tanking. I think Stephen Ross, the reason why they have not fired Mike McDaniel yet or made a quarterback change is because they don't want that interim head coach bump, right? I think at some point you may see Quinn Ewers out there later in the season. I think Miami is more focused on how do we reset this roster moving forward. There's a lot of things this team has to do. This team is about to go into complete rebuild mode. But I do think this is one of those weird games where it's like the Falcons should win. They should win by a lot. They're a good team, but they're not a great team. But Miami in a dome does scare me. The fast track, they could cover. Maybe it's a sense of overthinking things. I don't know. I'll take the Falcons to win. Quite frankly, I think this is going to be an ugly game, and I don't really want to bet it, to be honest with you. With Bryce Young out, I know Andy Dalton's in there, and I know Carolina can run the football with Chuba Hubbard and Rico Dottle. But I think the Bills coming off a bye, this is where they have to go in. They have to make a statement. I'm going to take them to cover -7.5. I don't know if Andy Dalton's going to move the ball the way Bryce Young can. I know the Bills cannot stop the run. We'll see if they get that corrected during the bye week. But I think they can win this by at least a touchdown if they are the old Bills. I think it's more of a conversation of if this game's really close, or if Carolina, God forbid, at home pulls off this 7.5 upset against the Bills, the New England Patriots defeat the Browns. The Bills have the Chiefs on deck. All of a sudden, we're looking at the Bills, who are easily favored to win the AFC East this year. Do they go from 4-0 on top of the division going into that week 5 game against New England on Sunday Night Football to out of the playoff picture by week 9? I think it's a real conversation if they lose these next 2 games to Carolina and Kansas City. I think they need to prove themselves. I think they need to flex their weight. I think Josh Allen coming off a bye, he had 2 bad back-to-back games against the Patriots and the Falcons. They need to refocus. They need to use James Cook a lot more. They need to use the weapons they have in Kincaid and Knox and Shakir and Keon Coleman and just do Buffalo Bills things and take care of business and cover the 7.5. Niners Texans, I have no idea what to make of it because of the Niners injuries on defense. Bryce Huff obviously played well last week, but I don't know if that pass rush is going to be able to duplicate what they did against the Falcons. But if there's a team they could do it against, against the Texans, who have a terrible offensive line. CJ Stroud has not played up to his expectations this season. They're having a hard time as it is to get Nico Collins the ball. Yet this does feel like a game where the Texans at home in a controlled environment going up against Mac Jones, the defense that they have, can they force some turnovers? Can Will Anderson get him to the quarterback? Can Derek Stingley do enough against what will be out there for San Francisco to not allow the Niners to ball control this game with Christian McCaffrey? And could the Texans find a way to squeak out a victory? I think it's possible, but I do think that the San Francisco 49ers here on the road, I think Kyle Shanahan's going to dial something up. I think the fact that Texans are only 1.5 point favorites at home shows that Vegas respects San Francisco to me, and I'm going to follow the money here, if you will, and I'm going to take the Niners. And then my last best bet on the board. I know this is a 4 o'clock game. Tampa just got humiliated, and yes, Mike Evans will not be there, but they got humiliated in prime time on Monday night against the Lions. I think they bounce back, and I know Kellen Moore and the Saints and Spencer Rattler, they try hard. Historically, that defense has been a bad matchup for that Tampa Bay offense, but this is a different Saints team that has a lack of talent. Marshawn Lattimore is not there anymore. And this is a different Tampa Bay team, who I still think is really good. I think Baker Mayfield puts on a show. I think Emeka Buka in that dome down there in New Orleans. I think they come out, they play really well. They play a lot of close games, but this may be one of those ones they win comfortably. I at least think they can cover the 4.5. And then Colts are going to win against the Titans. Listen, they probably will cover 14.5. This thing's going to get ugly, but it's a division game. I don't know if you should ever take a team favorited by 14.5 in a division game, even though this thing is lopsided. But the Titans have historically had the Colts number, though this is obviously a different Titans team with a roster that is completely stripped down to the bone. I think Daniel Jones, Jonathan Taylor, the Colts, DeForest Buckner on the defensive side, they just take care of business. And then we have Denver, who, let's face it, over the last 3 games has played 2 good quarters. The fourth quarter at Philadelphia, the fourth quarter at home against the Giants. They are 3-0 in those games. But Denver could be 2-4. It could really be 1-5. I mean, they almost lost to the Tennessee Titans week one. They didn't nearly beat the Colts in week two. Obviously, that leverage penalty is what led to that game-winning field goal by the Colts, but they did not play particularly well in that game either. So maybe that fourth quarter stretch by Denver was what proposed Bo Nix to have a better second half of the season. But they're coming in against the Cowboys offense. Former Bronco Javonte Williams, CeeDee Lamb, George Pickens, and obviously quarterback Dak Prescott, who I do think is in the MVP conversation, has been lighting it up. I think the Cowboys are the Bengals of this year, where they're just going to score 40. And they hope the opposing team doesn't score 41. Denver has a really good defense, but they have been beat up the last couple of weeks by the Giants and the Eagles. You can move the ball on this Broncos defense. Yes, they're getting sacks, but that is what's stopping teams. You can move the ball in yardage. They're just doing a good job holding teams in the red zone or getting a key sack when push comes to shove. I think the Cowboys are going to move the ball on Denver. I think Denver wins. I think this is a very close game. It feels like a 3-point game either way. It feels like a wild game that comes down to the last play of the game. And I feel like the 3.5 there with the hook, the Cowboys are probably the side because I don't think Denver can really dominate anybody right now. But also historically, Dallas has not done well in Mile High Stadium. Then you look at Green Bay at Pittsburgh. And when the schedule came out, I immediately said I think the Packers are going to win this game. I think Jordan Love has something to prove, and I'm sticking to it. I think the Packers are going to go into Pittsburgh here. Now, this is a very interesting game because the Packers have not played well since their Week 2 Thursday night win against Washington that was in Green Bay. Jordan Love has had sort of a up and down season. He's been good, but he hasn't been spectacular. And while the Packers pass rush, led by Rashawn Gary, Quay Walker, Micah Parsons, who got 3 sacks last week in Arizona, it's been excellent. The thing about Pittsburgh and Aaron Rodgers is he's not getting sacked a lot because they're using a lot of tight ends. They're throwing the football down the field to only one man, and that man is DK Metcalf. But they are protecting Aaron Rodgers. They've been able to run the football with Jalen Warren. And so it's a really interesting matchup. Aaron obviously knows Matt LaFleur's ins and outs on the offense. I'm sure he'll give some tells to Mike Tomlin, which Arthur Smith and the Steelers run a very similar system. Aaron has not gone up against Jeff Hafley's defense. He became the new defensive coordinator last year when Aaron was in New York. But the Green Bay secondary is not great. I think this is going to be a ball control game. The Steelers have the names on defense: TJ Watt, Alex Highsmith, Cam Hayward, Jalen Ramsey, Darius Slade, Joey Porter Jr., Patrick Queen. But they have not played up to their expectations this year. They've gotten a lot of sacks in garbage time to inflate their numbers. But this does feel like a very low scoring game, somewhere between 23 to 20. Again, a lot like Dallas. I think if I had to bet at 3.5, I think the side is Pittsburgh with the hook. I think it's a 3, 4 point game somewhere around there. I think it's close down to the wire. Very entertaining. I want to see Aaron Rodgers' interactions with the likes of Jordan Love and Matt LaFleur pre and post. But I think Green Bay disappoints Aaron Rodgers and they beat their former signal caller. And then listen, I would take the Chiefs minus 10.5. Again, it's a large spread. I think there's a little bit better numbers on the board than that. Marcus Mariota is coming in for Washington, and Washington's next 3 games, they got Kansas City, they got Seattle, and they got Detroit. And they're already 3-4. They could turn into 3-7. We don't know the status of Jaden Daniels. The Chiefs played tremendous against the Raiders. 31-0 shutout. They're back in their groove, right? Patrick Mahomes is back to having fun and doing the weird cadences and everything that they've got going. They've got a healthy Rashid Rice. They got a healthy Xavier Worthy against a Commanders team whose secondary is not great. It's a bad matchup. I think the Chiefs are going to win. If you want to take Kansas City in Survivor, I think it's a pretty good pick this week. I think Baltimore, as long as Lamar, is also a pretty good pick. I'm going to go, though, with New England over Cleveland. I think the Chiefs win this game, but again, at 10.5, I just sort of want to stay away from those big numbers. So, to recap, in the money line, I have the LA Chargers over Minnesota. I have Philly over the Giants. I have New England over Cleveland. Baltimore over Chicago. Cincinnati over the Jets. Atlanta over Miami. Buffalo over Carolina. San Francisco over Houston. Tampa over New Orleans. Indy over Tennessee. Denver over Dallas, Green Bay over Pittsburgh, and Kansas City over Washington. There are six teams on a bye this week, which are the Raiders, the Jags, the Rams, the Cardinals, the Seahawks, three out of those four in the NFC West, and the Detroit Lions. So there are only 13 games this week. Now, my five best bets for week 8 of the 2025 NFL season are I'm going to take the Ravens. I'm going to take them -6.5. I think Lamar Jackson comes back. I think they look like the old Ravens as they take down the Bears at home. I'm going to take New England by a touchdown, -7 over the Browns. I'm going to take the Bengals -6.5 against the Jets. I think Joe Flacco can do enough to beat a Jets inept offense. I'm going to take Buffalo. Andy Dalton's in there for Carolina. The line is 7.5. I think Josh Allen, James Cook. I think the Bills bounce back off their bye. And I'm also going to take Tampa, who got humiliated Monday night against Detroit. They're only favored by 4.5. That line feels way too low. They're much more better than their rival in New Orleans. I think they cover 4.5. Like that clip from the Brands World podcast? If so, make sure you go down there and hit that subscribe button. While you're down there hitting the subscribe button, make sure to also hit the notification bell so you never miss another upload. And make sure you check out all the other clips from the Brands World podcast right here on YouTube.